Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Racing Dudes Daily Show. We're back covering the Preakness Stakes. Aaron Halchman, Mike Somich, Magic here to talk about it. Gentlemen, the headline that we're going to talk about for 5 seconds because Aaron, you guys did a great job on Blinkers Off last night. Rich Strike, winner of the Kentucky Derby, out of the Preakness Stakes. Just your overall thoughts real quick, Aaron.
Well, it's disappointing from a standpoint of a lot of new people would have watched this race and would have been really excited to see him. If you didn't want to bet him, it's disappointing as well because you think he was going to take money and maybe you could take advantage of that. And of course, if you did want to bet him, it's also disappointing. So I guess the right word is just disappointment that the Derby winner will not be at Pimlico next weekend.
Mike, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think Aaron nailed it, man. It's a bummer. I think that's really the best way to put it. We had a lot of new eyes on the sport because an 80-1 shot won the Derby. I think a lot of people would have been following that horse back to the Pimlico. Obviously not going to have a shot at a Triple Crown winner this year, which kind of is a bummer for Belmont as well. And as a bettor, I was looking forward to fade the crap out of the horse. So I would have been happy to see that horse at Pimlico because the combination of Secret Oath and him was going to make it kind of like a juice-free race in my mind. And now we just have Secret Oath that's going to take some money that I think is going to be ill-fated. But we'll see what happens. We move on, and we'll be fine without Rich Strike. We were just fine without him 2 weeks ago. We'll be fine without him next week.
Well, part of the reason that his trainer said that they were going to wait until the Belmont was the spacing, and that kind of brings up an interesting discussion, Aaron, that the Triple Crown season, for as long as I can remember, anybody can remember, it's been Derby, 2 weeks to the Preakness, 3 weeks to the Belmont, and part of that rigorous schedule is what makes it so tough to win the Triple Crown season, but the way that training has changed in America and the way that racing overall, the landscape is changing, is that broken? Do we need to change the system?
Yeah, I have been against it forever, but I think it's time we read what the connections of these horses are telling us. And this is not a reaction to Rich Strike. I've kind of started to feel like this the last couple of years. We go all year trying to get to the Derby, building up these 20 horses, watching these 20 horses run in all these different races, getting to know all of these horses. And we get to the Preakness, and it's like 2 or 3 runners from that Derby that go to the Preakness. And a lot of them end up skipping the Belmont because it's kind of more of a specialist type of race. It's a mile and a half. And so we go all year building up these horses, and then we don't see them again until the summer a lot of times. To me, I think we have to take into account what the owners, what the trainers are telling us, and we have to adjust. I know it kind of, hey, it ruins it, that tradition and history and all that, and it's going to be easier. I think it'd be harder to win if we spread them out 4 weeks apart. You know why? I think the races would be better. You would have better horses. Epicenter is in the Preakness. Zandon's not going to go. What's easier? Beating a weaker field in 2 weeks or trying to have to beat Zandon again? What if we had to deal with Messier if he had a reasonable pace? To me, spacing it out is the only way we're going to end up saving this because right now it seems very irrelevant right now to me, the Triple Crown. It really does. It's never meant less for me. And that's a guy that was there and was in tears when American Pharoah won it. But when you look at who trained American Pharoah, Baffert, who trained Justify, Baffert, is that what it takes to win this thing now, the way we're training horses? Somebody like Baffert? To me, to save it, we got to space it out. And I'm not saying 6 weeks in between, 8 weeks in between, 4 weeks, the normal time period that we space all of our other big races out. That's what I would like to see.
Strong argument for changing the system and kind of spacing out the Triple Crown a little bit. Mike Somich, you're on the other side of the fence here. Go ahead with tradition. Explain why that's better.
Yeah, it's a terrible take, Aaron. Let's first off, let me be very clear. I'm for a shorter NBA season. I'm for a shorter Major League Baseball season. I don't give a damn about the records. You can shrink that stuff down. I don't think it makes any sense. As far as changing the Triple Crown, we have to stop being reactionary about this, okay? The last 4 years have been a little bit of a mess. You had Country House the first time. Country House we literally never saw again at the racetrack. So he misses the Preakness. Okay, fine. The next year, the Preakness was actually the third jewel of the Triple Crown because of COVID. So Authentic runs in the Derby, wins that, runs back in the Preakness. Great to see him there. Last year, Medina Spirit went to the Preakness. We also had other Bafferts that challenged Medina Spirit. It was a 10-horse field. It was a darn good race, if I remember correctly. This year, Rich Strike isn't going to the Preakness. You know why? Because he'd get waxed there. That's the real reason why he's not going to the Preakness. So let's take a smaller picture or bigger picture at this and not just focus on the last 4 years where I agree with you. Yes, and we've had some ownership groups who have passed on the Preakness because of that. But the Preakness traditionally hasn't been the massive field. But if you look at some of the races we've gotten through the years, the Preakness, you could make an argument, is one of the best Triple Crown jewels from just a race perspective. I mean, you've got a Fleet Alex, you've got Sunday Silence Easy Goer, you've got Rachel Alexandra, you get storylines because you get new shooters who couldn't make the Derby or who were able to progress. And then you have to take factor in, it's tough to turn around in 2 weeks. That's the whole darn point of this thing, is that it's hard to turn around in 2 weeks. And then on top of that, the Belmont is a specialty distance. It's 1.5 miles. It's different. If you're going to argue about changing the Triple Crown, change the Belmont distance over changing the timeline, in my mind, to make it more consistent for a single horse to be able to win all three. The other problem with this, let's say we do your plan. Does Pimlico even run in early June when they would actually run the second one? And then Belmont would be running the third one in early July, which completely screws the Haskell, which completely screws the Travers, which completely screws the Breeders' Cup. You essentially have to change the entire schedule if you're choosing to do that. Obviously, it's possible. We saw it happen in the COVID year. But it completely changes everything from the 3-year-old perspective. And you're also going to get people training differently if you do this. You're going to see people that are going to start. You're going to have more horses that are aiming for just the Belmont because it's later in the 3-year-old season. You're going to have trainers specifically focus on that. So to me, you are completely re-architecting the system. It's not as simple as let's push it back 2 weeks. Let's push it back 2 weeks. You're changing the entire yearly schedule. Really, this is a reaction of the last 4 years. Prior to that, everything was fine. And you actually agree with that. The old Aaron agreed with that. So to me, it's a lot to do with the fact that the last 4 years have been a little funky, and that's because of COVID, the first ever DQ, and the longest shot since 1913. If we're going to change everything because of those data points, we're going to change a lot of things.
All good points. I don't disagree with anything he said, especially about the Preakness being such an exciting race. Over the years, this has been the most exciting race. It really has. I mean, you take away the hype of the Derby and the craziness of it. You just look at, okay, what race is really exciting? The Preakness year in and year out does kind of produce really good results. Here's the problem. Number one, there's two things I'll kind of counter here. I think we saw in the COVID year, the Triple Crown makes their decision on when to run, and then everybody else follows suit. I think that would happen again if they changed it. I think everybody else would just kind of fall into place. Here's the problem. There's less and less trainers that are willing to do this. That's where the problem is, right? Look at this year. Chad Brown, Zandon could win the Preakness, guys. There's no doubt. He's not going to do it. He's not going to put him in there, right? Is it because he put good magic in there and then he wasn't any good the rest of the year? Maybe. Less and less people really want to do it. Okay, let's take a look at who we've got from the Derby. We got Epicenter. Well, he's trained by Steve Asmussen, right? He's an old school type of guy. You got Simplification. Sano, he runs them. Lucas. Think if Lucas didn't win this, Oaks. That's another horse you could take out. Lucas is the only person in the world that would put that filly back in 2 weeks. We're hitting less and less of these people. Lucas is 87 years old. I mean, it's really pigeonholing who will actually try it. Mike, wouldn't you love to see White Barrio in this race? I know I would.
Yeah, but again, you're looking at this through a very short lens. This year's Derby, I'm like, it's a data point you throw out. It's just a wonky Derby because of the pace, how bad the trips were. Like, of course, Messier is not going to come back. The plan was to bring White Barrio back. We talked to the ownership group before. They said, we're going to go to the Preakness. And you know what? They ended up 5 wide, and ran into a really fast pace, and the horse is gassed, so they're not going to go back for the Preakness. If this Derby played out differently, you would have a much more horses in this Preakness field. And I think that's part of the reason you're seeing a weaker Preakness field this year. This has not been a problem throughout all of the 90s and all the early 2000s from a competitive Preakness standpoint. And so, to me, changing it because of the last 4 years is short-sighted. If you want to make an argument where, like, okay, throughout 2010 to 2015, we weren't getting good fields, no trainers were going, fine, but they were. I mean, you were seeing horses from Pletcher's barn go there, and Brown has only had a couple shots, and he knows that Zandon, I actually don't think Zandon could beat Epicenter. I think that the way this race is also drawn up makes me, if I was training a horse, I would be very disinterested in going to this race, because you have a lone speed horse in early voting, and you have Epicenter, who's clearly the best horse in the class right now, who's going to sit right behind and trip out. Do you really want to send Zandon in there versus taking him at 1.5 miles where he's got a better shot at winning the race? I mean, to me, part of this is just being strategic. It's the same reason Rich Strike isn't there. You don't want to have this great story and then 2 weeks later get waxed by 15 lengths because you don't get the same pace setup.
Well, here's the deal. If the race was 4 weeks apart, there would be no debate. Zandon would be in the race.
Maybe. Rich Strike wouldn't. He wouldn't show up if this race was 2 months apart.
Well, I mean, you're not going to catch all of them, right? But we're going to have like 2 horses from the Derby in the Preakness. And it is for Mark, 1,000%. I hate that over half the field of the Derby, we don't see him again until the Haskell or the Travers. That's awful. I agree. And I think the only way you fix it is to make it more appealing for these new ownership groups and trainers to run in the race. And then if you space it out and they still don't run, well, I don't know what to tell you at that point. But maybe it's a problem that's just not fixable. But I just got to think, if we space it out 4 weeks, these horses that were taking money in the Derby, and now we won't see them again until the summer, they would be definitely more inclined to go to the Preakness.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not going to argue that if it was 4 weeks that you'd have more horses that were interested in going there. But I think that the ancillary issue of changing everything else is going to affect the Haskell. It's going to affect the Travers. It's going to affect how everything else plays out as well. And look, you have a whole point system just to get in the Derby. Of course, the other 2 legs aren't going to be as glorified, right? I mean, you have horses coming in from Japan. You have horses coming in from Dubai, all coming to run in the Kentucky Derby. They don't give a damn about the Preakness, right? And that could be more of the issue that you're seeing here. And you want to change that? Throw some bucks at it. The Preakness was a $5 million race. You know what? There would be a hell of a lot more than 8 horses that are going to be in this field. So
that's an interesting argument. Would there be? Would all of a sudden that 2 weeks not make any difference? Oh, no, we can do that. That would be an interesting experiment to maybe try.
I mean, if there was a bonus for running the Derby winner, and if your horse ran in the Derby and you got $1 million bonus if it wins the Preakness, you really think 2 would show up? Or you think you'd have 5 or 6? I mean, there's ways to fix this problem without spacing it out. It's just horse racing is not always very creative around ways to fix problems. Yeah. But to me, the spacing it out causes too many issues. And look, I like the fact that it took 30 years to get a Triple Crown winner. And the people, if you're trying to get outside people interested in it, Rich Strike was the only horse that mattered, right? Yeah. So outside of that, the field is it's all about hardcore horse racing people that are going to care about the Preakness now, which is generally what happens if you don't have one of these Derby horses that is exceptional.
Well, and Mark says we're going to put a star by it if we change it. What have we put by the last 2 winners, right? Have we really seen a Triple Crown winner? Like, how long has it actually been now?
Would we have put a star by
That's from the biggest American Pharoah fan in the world. Jared and I and my wife stood right next to him when he won the Arkansas Derby. We were in the Arkansas Derby winner's circle with him. And I don't really count him anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because I have great Justify memories too with my dad because we went to that Preakness. And so it's kind of a bummer. We look back like, well, yeah.
He's the horse in our logo for the Magic Bike Show. You and I started that in 2018 when he did that big Triple Crown run. So we're literally tied together with Justify on that one. It's an interesting debate, and Aaron, you made great points. I think that history shows that either eventually we'll space out or things are going to fall apart for us here. So hopefully we do space out eventually, but I'm going to side with Mike Somich right now on the side of tradition. I think that he kind of won me over in the chat, is kind of on his side here as well.
Just a real quick question. Would we have put an asterisk by 'Tis the Law?
I mean, that's a good question. A lot of people were saying yes to that answer.
I mean, because he would have won the Belmont first, then the Derby, then the Preakness later in the season. Like, it was completely different. Yeah. Would that have been an asterisk one? I mean,
we have that way with Authentic's record, right? Is the Authentic set the Derby record, but he did it 3-4 months after anybody else has ever run the race, so he's a lot farther developed, Mike. So kind of, to your point there.
It's interesting. So I think that you probably would have had an asterisk by it, right? Because it was done differently, and obviously the record is held differently there. And if you look at Aaron's way of doing this, if we did say it was every 4 weeks, Arrogant might have been your Belmont winner because he ends up rolling in the Travers just 4 weeks later. So you'd have completely different horses in these races if we changed it as well, which I don't think is necessarily fair to the horses that have been able to do this in the past.
So let me ask you guys a question. Everybody listening, you guys as well. Little bit of devil's advocate, but I'm kind of serious about it. Have you guys put an asterisk over every Super Bowl winner, every college national champion, every World Series winner, every NBA title winner, every Stanley Cup winner in the past however many years since they changed their original format? of how to make the playoffs?
I actually had this argument with my nephew where a lot of the titles are BS because they were won prior to having a certain number of teams. Now, I don't put an asterisk by them, but you can't tell me that the Montreal Canadiens have won the most Stanley Cups in history. That's a joke because they won the mass majority of them when there were 6 teams.
But why did all those entities change? They adapted with the times. They adapted to what people wanted. They adapted to what people were telling them to do. On and on and on. I don't see it a whole lot differently. I really don't. And again, I think it would be more difficult to win the Triple Crown 4 weeks apart because I think the better horses would be right there. They could take advantage and actually win one of these races if given the opportunity. I mean, you can't sit here and definitively say Zandon can't beat Epicenter. Epicenter has lost to Call Me Midnight and Rich Strike. So he's got a history of losing to horses he shouldn't lose to.
Well, to be fair, Zandon has never beaten Rich Strike either. So let's not forget about that if we're gonna use that point against him. To me, the whole point of the Triple Crown is to try and find new fans, though, at this point, right? If we're really talking about, because the reason why there's expansion in all those sports, there's money. That's the reason. They wanted to make more money.
Yeah.
And if you're in horse racing, you're saying we want to expand the sport, does leaving the Triple Crown 2 weeks apart and then 3 weeks apart, is that better for expanding the sport because you have the attention after the Derby? Or is it waiting a month and then waiting another month? Because I would argue that the faster the better if you're trying to get new eyes continually to be on the sport.
You could debate it either way, I would argue. And again, you don't think Rich Strike would be there anyway, but let's say in a world that he would be there, I think that it would be help to have Rich Strike at the Preakness. I think that would get more eyes on it, right? Now we have an 80-1 shot that's not going to be in the Preakness. By the time the Belmont gets here, I'm sure there will be people watching, but how will the hype be, you know?
Well, the story would have been if he had won the Preakness.
Oh, my goodness.
If Rich Strike had won the Preakness, then all of a sudden it's going to be a movie. This is a story for the ages type thing, right? And we're not even going to get the chance to see that. And I would argue that the only way you would have seen it is money. If you had a $5 million bonus for him winning the Preakness, guess what? He's probably running that race because everything we heard is he came out of the race wonderfully. He'd been working out as good or better than he had before. Yeah. He galloped 2 miles the morning of the announcement that they're doing this for the horse. Everything was this horse is fine. Now he may not be in it, and if he's not, they're doing right by the horse. Awesome, good for them. It's completely their choice of what to do here. But if you had a $5 million bonus for winning that race, I would be willing to bet that he's in it.
I would say you're probably right on that. I'm not gonna, like I said, you make good points. I have been for how old am I now? Well, how long have I been in racing? 15, 20 years. No, that's stupid. Don't change it. But I also like to see the best horses run in the biggest races, and we're just simply not getting it. And that's not a new problem. I mean, this comment, I really couldn't care less if Rich Strike was in this race Saturday. I couldn't. This is not about Rich Strike. I'm actually happy he's not there. How about that? But no, I'm not either because I would have bet against him. But
come on, run him.
I'm not happy that he's not going to be there. But this is more about the Florida Derby winner not being there, the Bluegrass runner not being there. You know, how about Smile Happy, a horse that he's not going to be? You know, that's what it's about. That's the kind of horses I'd love to see run again. And again, Smile Happy's another one. He's totally pigeonholed. He's not going to turn around in 2 weeks, and he can't go a mile and a half. So all of a sudden, it's just like, well, we'll see him when we see him. Well, I can tell you right now, that's not building anybody as a fan that's trying to be a new fan. They're like, hey, I kind of like that Smile Happy horse, whether it's his name or, hey, I saw him just win randomly at Churchill last year. And it's like, well, where did he go? 6 months later, they're like, when he shows up in the Ohio Derby or whatever, they're like, what is the Ohio Derby and why should I care?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to keep saying it's money, man. If they had $1 million bonus to win this race, if you were in the Derby, I bet Smile Happy's there. You know, I bet you'd see many more horses there, but they're not interested in doing that, and you don't have the same company, right? So that would be Stronach putting up the $1 million to help Churchill horses that just ran. Completely different companies that are both publicly traded that are against each other. Like, so you have some issues inside the industry that create more of it makes it more difficult to be able to do this kind of stuff. But Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I want to see better fields. I think this year is an anomaly. I think this specific field is an anomaly. And so I'm willing to pass that. We had a couple people mention in the chat, usually get some Keeneland allowance winners, usually get someone from California that wants to come in here and try this race. Usually have some Oaklawn horses that want to try this race. And we just don't have that this year either. Like the depth of this 3-year class wasn't the depth that we have seen in some other years.
Look at last year. Forget about this year.
Did 10 horses. It was a good race.
It was a terrible race. None of the good horses came back and ran in that race. Rombauer and Midnight Bourbon were the top 2 finishers of that race. That's the only argument I need to make.
I don't want to hear.
Wasn't there. Hot Rod Charlie wasn't there. Mandaloon wasn't. None of the good Derby horses were there, except the winner was there. Nobody else was.
Right, but that's what everyone cared about, the winner. And you had Concertor who went in and tried to take a shot after running at Oaklawn. You had a horse, Rombauer, coming from California. You had a horse in Midnight Bourbon who came back. And you ended up with a good Belmont as well. And you had 10 horses in the field.
Because they all skipped the Preakness. They could have ran it all 3 if they were spaced out properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we could have had a great Triple Crown series with 3 good races.
It's
Instead of one
problem.
where the horse got disqualified because of drugs, one that was a terrible, really just a bad race, and then an amazing Belmont. I agree with the Belmont. That was an amazing Belmont.
Unbelievable. Just the Rombauer slander.
It would have been fantastic to see those great horses run 3 instead of 2.
We got.
Mike, you brought up a great point that Rombauer made it last year because he won that Golden Gate race. Well, the winner this year, Blackadder, nobody knows where he's at. We haven't seen him since he ate shit in the bluegrass. And then you've got Joe is going to come, it sounds like, but he wins the Tessio. That's a win and you're in. And then there's another race, the Oaklawn Stakes, right? Isn't that supposed to be a Preakness race? Mm-hmm. I couldn't even tell you who won that, but I don't think that horse is showing up, are they? And there's even if they did, there was nobody of note this year that won that race that's coming in.
Yeah, Homebrew won it, and he's not on the probable list. Yeah,
right. And everyone loved Homebrew too. Yeah, everyone was like, "Hey, that's going to be a Preakness horse. It's a great Preakness horse," and just doesn't show up. And like, to me, that again, this is showing we need to update it with Rombauer. I love that just for Aaron. It's just showing that this crop is the problem to me, not this overall problem. I do believe there's a Preakness problem. I think you solve it with money. I think you figure out how to do that if you really care about the Preakness. But the other part is Stronach wasn't even want the Preakness at Pimlico. So you have that part of the issue. They want it to be a Laurel. There's other problems that are kind of in the foreground for the Preakness as well. I think it's more of a Preakness issue than a spacing issue.
I feel like if you want to try to solve it with other ways, I would try that first. I would compromise with that situation. But if we're sitting here and we're getting 2 and 3 Derby horses year after year, you just have to do something at that point.